In Jeremiah chapter 32, the prophet Jeremiah begins a prayer in verse 17 with these words: Ah, sovereign Lord, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you. On Friday, we talked about disappointment. Today, we're starting a 3-part series on overcoming discouragement. If the issue you are wrestling with has discouraged you and gotten you down, here's what you need to do. First, take a short look at the problem. Someone once said, to hatch despair, just brood over your troubles. Many people who experience setbacks ask why, but they never move beyond the question to the answer. Certainly, you can't solve your problems by ignoring them, but you can't solve them by becoming fixated and immobilized by them either. Once you recognize and analyze the problem, you need to focus on the solution. Second, take a long look at the possibilities. Sometimes the problem that you face can help you see the possibilities that you didn't know existed. When Lewis Waterman needed to sign a document to close a deal, the fountain pen that he was using wouldn't write. As a result, Waterman worked to develop the now famous fountain pen that bears his name worldwide. Dr. Alexander Fleming was a famous Scottish bacteriologist. Returning from a vacation to St. Mary's Hospital in London, Fleming found cultures of Staphylococcus aureus in the lab, which he meant to throw away before he left. To his surprise, some of the cultures died. Further investigation led Fleming to discover that a fungus which had grown in the culture destroyed bacteria. The type of fungus he found was a mold called Penicillium notatum. Howard Walter Florey, an Australian pathologist, and Sir Ernst Boris Chain, a German-born British biochemist, isolated and purified the penicillin for general clinical use. First calling it mold juice, Fleming rebranded it as penicillin, and it was the first antibiotic discovered and is a treatment that has helped save millions of lives. It's very likely that you're facing something negative today. And if that's the case, there's an opportunity contained in it somewhere, somehow. It might not be easy to find, and it may not lead to a major breakthrough like it did for Waterman and for Fleming. But then again, it might, especially if it causes you to turn to God for answers. In the words of Jeremiah, "Ah, sovereign Lord, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you." Pastor Allen will pick this discussion up tomorrow, and Pastor Mike will wrap it up on Wednesday. And you can catch both parts on our Facebook page at the Village Church at World Golf Village. But while I've got a couple more minutes, here are 8 more successful inventions that came about accidentally. Number 1, the implantable pacemaker. An implantable pacemaker is a battery-powered device that is placed under a person's skin that helps the heart perform normally. The device sends electrical impulses to keep the heart beating at a regular rhythm. In 1956, Wilson Greatbatch, an engineer, was working on a device to record the rhythm of a human heartbeat, but he used the wrong size resistor in the circuit. The device created intermittent electrical impulses that closely mimicked the sound of a human heartbeat. While hospitals already had pacemaker machines, they were large, painful, and immobile. Greatbatch discovered that his invention could run electrodes directly to the muscle tissue of the heart, keeping a patient's heart on track. With such a device, patients who needed pacemakers would not have to remain at the hospital, and they wouldn't have to use the painful machines. So he worked on making the device small enough to fit inside of a human body. He collaborated with Dr. William Chardak of the Buffalo VA Medical Center and Dr. Ander Gage to implant the device in a dog. Then in 1960, they implanted the first pacemaker into a man, prolonging his life by 18 months. The second one is the Slinky. Known for the mesmerizing way it descends down the stairs, the Slinky was created by naval engineer Richard James, according to the Strong National Museum of Play. Trying to develop a spring that would keep equipment steady on ships, James knocked the coiled metal off a ledge and saw the incredible effect that it had. He showed his wife Betty the accidental invention, and she had the idea to make it into a toy. And boy, what a successful toy the Slinky became. I've got family that lives near Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania, where Mr. James lived. And the home that he was able to build with all the money that came from the Slinky fortune, we refer to as the Slinky Mansion. But yes, another great invention by accident. Third, we have Post-it notes. A scientist named Dr. Spencer Silver was working to develop an incredibly strong adhesive in 1968. By accident, he created the exact opposite, an incredibly weak adhesive. Silver relentlessly shared his invention with colleagues, but he couldn't get traction to make it into a product. But one of his colleagues, Arthur Fry, came up with the idea of using the adhesive on bookmarks. Fed up with little papers falling out of his hymnal at church, he determined that Silver's invention was the solution he was looking for. So they worked on developing a bookmark and, after notes on them, decided to make the product a new way to communicate. After a successful market test in Idaho, 3M began selling the Post-it note in 1979, and it rapidly grew in popularity. Fourth, we have Play-Doh. According to the Strong National Museum of Play, this classic children's toy began as a household cleaning product. Invented by soap company Kutal Products, the organization was in danger of going out of business in the late 1920s. However, Cleo McVicker secured a contract with Kroger grocery stores to produce a ready-made wallpaper cleaner for their stores. Using water, salt, and flour, the company developed a malleable compound to clean wallpaper. While this kept the company afloat, Kutal Products faced plummeting sales again by the 1950s. McVicker's son, Joseph, was encouraged by his sister-in-law, Kay Zufall, to make the product a toy for children. He visited her classroom to see the designs that the children made with the Kutal Products wallpaper cleaner, and he was convinced that this was the right way to pivot. Altering the ingredients to remold the product into a toy, Kutal Products established Rainbow Crafts Company Incorporated to sell Play-Doh. Lacking an advertising budget, McVicker convinced Bob Keeshan, the star of a popular TV show called Captain Kangaroo, to use the product on the show. Play-Doh was launched into the national spotlight, helping it become one of the most popular toys. Next, we have chocolate chip cookies. Kenneth and Ruth Graves Wakefield owned and operated the Toll House Inn, a tourist lodge located between Plymouth and Boston, Massachusetts. Cooking and serving all of the food for the guests, Ruth went to bake chocolate cookies for the guests, but she found that she was out of baker's chocolate. To improvise, she chopped up a Nestle semi-sweet baking chocolate bar, thinking that the chocolate would melt and spread into the batter. The chocolate didn't melt into the batter, however. Instead, it just softened. Although it wasn't what she was planning, Ruth served the cookies, and they quickly became a hit. She reached an agreement with Nestle, whose semi-sweet chocolate bar sales were growing rapidly. The company was allowed to print the Toll House cookie recipe on their packages while supplying Ruth with all the chocolate she needed. Sounded like a sweet deal. After trying to make the bars easier to cut, Nestle transformed the product by making bags of semi-sweet chocolate morsels, or what we know as chocolate chips, in 1939. Next, we have Velcro. George de Mestral, a Swiss engineer, examined the pesky burrs that stuck to his clothes when he was out walking his dog. He found that the burrs had minuscule hooks that allowed them to stick easily to fabric and to fur. God's design for the burrs inspired de Mestral to develop a fastening system that utilized the same concept, and the resulting product came to be known as Velcro. Next, we have that summer popular item, the popsicle. Fittingly, an 11-year-old boy invented this cherished children's treat. In 1905, Frank Epperson was going to make his own soda, filling a cup with powdered soda and water and putting a stirring stick in it. Leaving the concoction outside overnight, the soda froze to become the first popsicle. Nearly 20 years later, after successfully serving the frozen treats at a ball and at an amusement park, Epperson received a patent for the popsicle. First called the Epsicle, Epperson's children began calling it Popsicle, leading to the famous popsicle name. He sold the patent to the Joe Low Company of New York, which expanded the flavors. And last, we have superglue. Dr. Harry Coover was working on a research team at Eastman Kodak to develop clear plastics that could form precision sights for the U.S. military's guns during World War II. The team unintentionally found a chemical compound that was incredibly sticky, but they disregarded it because it had no use for the gun sights. In 1951, Coover was leading a project for the same company. This time, he and his team were looking to develop a clear and heat-proof material for jet plane canopies. One of the research students, ironically named Fred Joyner, rediscovered the same formula that Coover found in 1942. After testing the product, it was deemed a successful solution. Coover finally brought the discovery to the attention of the company, which first sold the product in 1958. It was a life-saving tool during the Vietnam War. U.S. soldiers used the glue to seal the wounds of injured soldiers. As my friends from Minnesota would say, pretty good stuff, don't you think? Have a great week. I'll see you on Friday with another word from the Word for You today.